Hey everyone, welcome to the Do the Thing podcast. This is your host, Stacey Lauren. One of the things I love about having a podcast is getting to meet people who are doing extraordinary things, and so extraordinary that they're able to come from such a deep place in the things they've had to overcome in their life. And then it's almost like there's this path to helping others when you've gone through something. I actually have been recently calling them initiations in life. And then the more that you've gone through in life, you're actually able to push through and help so many more people. But it comes from you and from the deepest part of you. And so anyway, that's kind of how I feel about this next guest that I'm going to be introducing to you. I've been slightly obsessed with his podcast. I've had several private sessions with him, and he has been just an amazing inspiration to me, and he helps so many people with so many things. And I'm just so excited to be able to talk to him more about his story and share him with you guys as well. So I am welcoming Ted to the show. Hey, Ted.
Hey, Stacey, thanks so much for that intro. And let's see if I can live up to it.
Yeah, I feel like, and I think you know this, I feel like you are that person that just feels very safe in the way that you're able to hear and listen, which I think a lot of people don't have that skill. And then in terms of being able to reflect back what the person needs to hear at the right time.
Yeah, that's key. I think most of the advice out there is quite bad, especially when it comes to coaching. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way. It wasn't like you alluded to my story and what I've been through. It wasn't like, yes, I've been through these things and now I'm just a great listener. I wasn't. I had to learn. I had a deep desire to help people. I started as a personal trainer when I was 22 after going through, like I said, you alluded to my story. My brother was kidnapped and murdered when I was 19. I got lost during that time, dropped out of school, wanted to become a neuroscientist, perhaps a doctor, got totally lost after that happened, and found my way into personal training when I was 22. And it was incredible. I had no education, no skills. Well, I guess I did have some skills when it came to exercise and everything, because it had been part of my life. But I was more of a partier in high school. I wasn't the jock. I was the weed smoking, skateboarding, heavy metal listening outcast, right? And there were a group of us, but we were all smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, and getting into trouble. And that whole situation when I was 19, I was starting to pull my life together. And it just changed everything for me. And as I said, I became a personal trainer at 22. And I realized that just showing people exercises and demonstrating how to do them and talking to my clients about what to eat in between sets, it just wasn't getting the results. And so I ended up getting into health coaching just a few years later and took Paul Chek's holistic lifestyle and health coaching certification. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that person, but it was a wild ride down health coaching and other aspects of health and fitness. And in part of what we learned and what I've learned over the years is that the type of coaching you do or anyone does needs to really be focused on the person. So what you'll hear people tell you is, oh, well, you got to do this. You got to do that. You and I, we've talked about 75 hard. I've got nothing against 75 hard. I like Andy Priscilla. I like David Goggins. I watch his Instagram clips and they make me laugh. But I don't think it's high quality coaching. I think it's great entertainment. I think it's motivational, especially for some people, but it's fleeting and it's external. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to help people change from the inside out, not just, hey, you got to get your life together. You got to get. I had a client recently. He wanted to work with me, but he was telling me he's an entrepreneur. Business is doing really well. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I like you, man. I want to work with you, but I don't really have that much motivation to change right now. And as we got into the conversation, he was telling me he really kind of wanted me to put pressure on him. And I told him, I was like, look, I can do that, but here's my concern. While that might be great for the LTV, right? The lifetime value of you as a client, it's not going to be great for you. And the reason is you're going to constantly need external motivation, external pressure to do the things that are really for you. And so what I said was, let's do this instead. Let's get some objective metrics. Let's get a DEXA scan. Let's get your blood work. Let's do a few other tests. We did a few other tests based on what he wanted to work on. And we got the results, and he wasn't doing as well as he thought. And so that helped get the necessary motivation. And this is all to say, to go back to your point, you really have to listen to people. You really have to meet them where they are. And if you don't, people keep failing and they blame themselves when it's really the coaching style. So that's what I have to say about that.
I think that's something I've noticed about you is that well-roundedness in the way that you are able to coach people and how you're able to look at it from a 10,000-foot view. You're not just looking at the food, you're looking at the mental, the emotional, the behavioral change, and the way that you're able to educate people, I think, is also really unique in the different things that you show.
Yeah, thank you. I never set out wanting to learn that stuff. I became fascinated by it eventually, but I was just like, man, why don't people just do, like, here's the plan, go do it. What's the problem? Of course, I was in my 20s at the time. I was single. I didn't even understand what I was doing because I followed a lot of misinformation during that time, which is much easier to do then than now. I was a strict low carb person. I had all these beliefs, and I thought you had to eat all organic food and all these other things, which now we know it's more nuanced than that. But I was doing all these things. I was lean, and I thought I had the answer, but I really didn't. And so maybe half of my clients got great results and the other half didn't. And I eventually got wiser and learned that what's missing here is we need to meet people where they are. We need to do an assessment. We need to figure out what's driving this person. What is their why? Why do they want to change so bad? Because just like buying decisions, we're both entrepreneurs. We all learn kind of the same rules. It's like people buy emotionally and then rationalize logically. People change emotionally and then rationalize logically as well. And we need to tap into that. And one of the things we do when we start with our clients is have them write down, what is driving you to make this change right now? And on the other side of that, what are you trying to achieve? What is that 2.0 or 3.0 version of yourself? And so that's really important to understand. Then setting the appropriate goals, and this is a mistake I made because I put up before and after photos, people see the transformation, and of course I put up successful body transformations. Some of my clients have successes, and it's not so much with the scale or with their body. And then I have some clients who didn't make the change, but I've been guilty of putting up, like a lot of people in my field, we put up the before and afters. And I want to do a better job of talking about why people don't achieve what they want. And I think one of the reasons that has been my fault in the past is I'll think about a client right now. He's still working with me. He's getting much better results now. But when we started, it was a bit rocky because he wanted to see his abs, which there's no, by the way, I just want to say this. One of the things that I hear from people the most is that this is going to sound terrible and so vain, but I just want to look better. When I ask them, why are you doing this? That's what they tell me. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to look better. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to look better. Just wanted to throw that out there. So that was his goal. He wanted to see his abs. Never saw them, even though he's been quite active in endurance sports. He's been in great shape. And that was the goal. Except as soon as he started, there were a lot of challenges because of his work. It just took him away from the plan that he would need to follow to achieve that goal, seeing his abs. And as a result, it became less motivating. He was feeling defeated, in his words. And what we had to do to change that, in fact, let me say this too, he was feeling so defeated, he didn't want to show up to coaching calls. Even though you know me, I do not put pressure on people. I'm not saying, oh, angry teacher here. Why didn't you do your homework? Oh, are you a loser? You're going to be a C student or an A student? I don't say things like that, but yet high performers, they put so much pressure on themselves. So I don't even feel like I need to. It's a terrible coaching strategy, but even if I thought it was good, I wouldn't even need to do it because high performers are already doing such a good job of putting pressure on themselves. And so he was skipping calls. And I finally got him to come to a call. I was like, what's going on? What he said was, well, I'm feeling defeated because I'm not hitting my goals. And I don't want to come to the call because it's a reminder when I have to talk about it of what I'm not doing. I'm already feeling bad about it enough. And on that call, I got him to reframe everything. He went from, he wanted to quit. And instead, we just had a conversation. I thought he was done too. We had a conversation like, what is this really about for you? What's going on here? What is driving you? What's the end goal for you? What are you trying to achieve? And then I said, I think I've done a bad job with setting your goals. What I think we need to do now is we need to make the bar super low. Your goal now is just to show up to calls. I don't care what you eat, how many times you work out, how many steps you get, whether you're eating donuts or this particular lady likes Korean blood sausage, right? And so I was like, whatever you're into, I don't care. That's not the goal. We need to start with something that feels good for you. Show up to the calls. It doesn't mean he has to do all the calls. Sometimes life gets in the way. Sometimes my travel gets in the way, but we needed to shift a goal. And I should say one thing about this. I made sure that he was getting value from the call. I was like, on a scale 1 to 10, how valuable are these calls for you? And he said, when we do the calls, it's an 8, 9, 9.5. Of course, he's one of those people who'll never give a 10, right? But okay, so the calls are valuable. You're getting a lot from them. Let's make the goal to just show up to the calls. And from our work and our experience, we know clients who show up to calls consistently, we get them better results. So as we started to make that shift, he started to feel better because he was winning. The goal was to show up to calls. He was doing it. And then he started asking for more. And I have another client who the same thing happened. We started him, it's a little bit different, but we started him with 2 workouts per week. And I adjusted his workout based on some feedback he gave me. I made it even easier for him to do. And he was like, I don't really want to do that. I said, just trust me. And what he said the following week, he's like, you know what? I was thinking to myself, maybe I should do a 3rd workout. So the other part here is setting that goal appropriately.
I think this is so huge. It reminds me of what I'm doing right now with the Start a Podcast Challenge. I'm doing a Do the Thing, Start a Podcast Challenge, where I'm helping people start their own podcast. And some of the people have been doing full-on videos from the beginning. And I noticed some people not participating. And I'm like, you guys, you could do it in your phone. You could do it in your car. You can just hit your phone, do the voice note, press record, or at the very minimum, just type in what you want to say. And just by saying that, it was giving permission, right, to just do the most minimum thing. And then it's sort of now these people are all doing videos and all this extravagant stuff because it took time to get that momentum going and for them to feel like they're having those psychological wins. And I feel like it's similar. And that's why I love that we're able to have this conversation, because we're talking about fitness right now and health. And you can also fill in the blank for anything else, right? It's starting with that goal. What is the most minimum thing you can start with just to feel like you're winning? I love the way you worded that. And then it sort of will open up from there.
Yeah, exactly. It's applicable to everything, that goal setting. And I love what you did with your people. It's like, just talk into the phone. You can get better later, fancier later, but you have to get moving. And so often we talk ourselves out of it. We overanalyze. We're too hard on ourselves. And I think that to keep going on this point a little bit, understanding that everything that we want to achieve is going to be on the other side of action. And people think, or I used to think, that human behavior was so complicated. Like, how do you figure people out? I don't think that so much anymore. I think sometimes it's very complicated, but we know that a lot of what drives us is pleasure and pain. And also, what gets a little confused sometimes is where we get our pleasure from. I'll give you an example. You can get, in your case, what you're doing with your Start a Podcast challenge. You can get pleasure from, you know what, Stacy told me to just record anything, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to practice a little bit more. I'm going to read about public speaking. I'm going to watch 10 TED Talks. I'm going to listen to some podcasts, and I'm going to watch some famous orators. And it's like, no, that can be helpful after already applying things, but you need to learn by doing. And we get a bit of a dopamine hit. Dopamine's that neurotransmitter in our brain that involved in our brain's reward system, just like how we get pleasure from eating pistachio pastries, like I was eating in Italy recently. We get a hit of dopamine, and dopamine reinforces behavior. And you can get really good and feel really good about doing nothing, meaning learning without any of the action. And so what I love about what you did there was you're trying to help people get into the habit of and win and get that little bit of dopamine hit from taking action instead of preparing more or thinking about it more.
Yeah. And this is really alive for me right now because it's this parallel of something, what you're doing right now, because it's change, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people make change. And then with the podcast challenge, something else that I noticed was they were in the beginning really focused on what mic and what this and what that. And even though I gave them the podcast platform to use, I said you could still, I left it open if they wanted to use another one. And then they're kind of going through all that research. And I realized they think they're moving by researching. They don't realize that they just need to start recording. And so it's been a huge learning lesson for me. And it sounds like you already have had this lesson, but I just learned it real time on how easy it is to get sidetracked from the thing you want to do by thinking you're doing it by looking up all these things.
Yeah, it's something that needs to be talked about more. And the problem is this in our society, which there's a lot of good things about our society, right? This is just one of the things that I think was not so positive, but we establish habits. And when we say habits, and there's a lot of talk about habits, and James Clear wrote a famous book about habits, but what habits are connections of brain cells, neural patterns, connections that have been wired together. Just like if you've ever played a musical instrument, or everyone can relate to this, everyone listening probably knows how to drive a car. But the first time they got in the car, it was like, oh my gosh, put this foot where, and hands here, and hands, and look out the rear view and your back, all these things. But now we drive and we talk and we don't even know how we got home because we're so immersed in the conversation. And that's, our brains create habits as shortcuts, because if you had to think about every single thing that you do, it would just probably be hard to survive back in the day. And the issue is that if you've had some habits that maybe served you in the past, or maybe just have never served you, but you developed them because you learned them early in life or whatever, it really sucks to break them. It feels uncomfortable. And it takes a while. And that's because the neural connections are pruning, because you only keep what you train, what you practice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to understand the changes that are happening at the brain level. Why is that important? Because you can kind of be hard on yourself when you fall back into old patterns. You can say, oh my gosh, I'm never going to change. I had a client recently tell me, my craving, she's a veterinarian and she, very busy at work, thriving practice. And she said, I was getting these cravings for Jimmy John's sandwiches. Now, I've never even had Jimmy John's, but I know it's like a sandwich shop like Subway. She's like, I never thought those cravings would go away, but they did. It just takes time.
Mm.
So the point of me saying that is, if you're listening to this and you're part of Stacy's challenge, or you're trying to change other habits and you're falling backwards, number one, that's normal. But number two, you need to get back on track. And number three, you need to stay the course until all the changes occur. And it happens in your brain, and it takes weeks or even months, depending on how ingrained the habits are, how stressed you are, how much sleep you're getting. So be patient.
What do you think is a good way for someone to win during that time? How do we give them a psychological win when they're kind of feeling like nothing's changing?
What a great question. Now, it's easy for my clients because I talk to them. And so having a mentor or a coach, provided they're the right coach. And what I mean by that is they have good strategies and you feel a connection with them. That helps a lot. You can also have, I think, and you're very passionate about this, and I'm totally 100% with you on this, having a support group of some type, having your tribe. Because we've worked one-on-one and you've been part of our group. One of the things that I hear from people in the group is, I thought I was the only one dealing with that. But everybody's having the same problems. And so we think that we're special and unique about our problems, and we are, but only in the details. But the general problems that people have, they're very similar. And people always walk away from those coaching calls feeling like, you know what? Some people are having the same challenges and overcoming them. Some people are doing worse than me. So this is quite normal what I'm experiencing. And then the other thing I would say is look at your habits, because the way we feel is created through our practices, our daily and weekly practices. Here's what I mean. We know that people, like you talked about my story, we haven't gone there yet, or maybe we won't, or whatever you want to do. But I talked about my brother's murder, but my sister committed suicide. My mother died when I was 14 and she was mentally ill. So there's the whole story there too. And so there's a lot of, let's say, what people call tragedies and trauma and recovering and grieving from that. And so the point is that one of the things I learned was I felt terrible after those things happened, as you would imagine. Horrible psychologically. And what I learned was every time I exercised, I felt better. And what that taught me was exercise did not fix the fact that my brother was gone or that my sister was gone. But it changed how I felt. And I was like, there's something to this. What is it? And what I learned was a lot of what happens when people go through tough things, and it doesn't have to be a crazy story like mine, because some people hear my story, they're like, whoa, I haven't gone through anything like that, but I did have a tough divorce, or my business didn't work out. I had to start another one. I'm growing my business and it's actually doing well, but I'm pulling my hair out because of learning all the new skills and feeling very frustrated. Whatever the challenge is, managing your emotions comes down to managing your physiology. Tony Robbins talks about that, right? What does he say? Motion is emotion, or emotion. I forget what the quote is, but he talks about changing your physiology changes the way you feel. And that's not just Tony Robbins saying it or me saying it. It's backed by science too. We know that doing exercise is as effective as taking antidepressants in a few studies that have been done comparing the two. So we know that this is really important, your habits. And one thing that I'm super passionate about and want to change the narrative about when it comes to exercise is people look at exercise like, are you exercising? No, I'm not trying to lose weight right now. It's like, trying to lose weight? That's not the only reason to exercise. In fact, exercise is pretty terrible for weight loss. It's got to be combined with nutrition. But you know what exercise is awesome for? Making you feel great. Before this call today, I went and did 40 minutes of cardio. I knew I was going to not have to, but I really enjoy doing these. But I wanted to perform at my best. I didn't want to come in even low energy. I wanted to come high energy. So being strategic about it and changing that narrative about exercise and health habits as looking at it as a way to thrive in life and have enough energy to do those things that we want to do. And also, I would even argue the vibe that we put out When we're feeling our best, it attracts a different level of success and other things in your life as well.
Yeah, it's so good to be able to see it in that way, as far as even just feeling good and being able to thrive on that too, in terms of when you're not seeing success physically or through what body part you want to improve. It's like, do I feel good? And then going back to what your client said, I think this is so true for so many people. The one that said he wasn't going to meetings initially because it was a reminder of the things that he wasn't doing. I mean, I see this sometimes with Do the Thing. People will just drop off, but then be scared to come back because they didn't meet the goal that they said they wanted to. And I just wanted to kind of stay here for a minute, because this kind of leads into the mindset piece of the Do the Thing formula. Is what are kind of your best strategies for that? And I think habits is under mindset and maybe a little bit under goals too, but just kind of curious what your thoughts are in the mindset piece.
Yeah, I love this conversation. And I'll answer that question like this. There was a version of me in the past who went through the things that I talked about, all the tragedies, and I was in a very bad place. And my relationships, I was in relationships with women who were struggling on their own with their own issues. They weren't emotionally healthy either. I was engaging in behaviors. I told you about high school years, smoking weed and doing all the things. When I was in my 20s, even as a personal trainer, I was going to clubs, taking ecstasy, getting drunk every weekend, and hanging out with people who, weren't adding a lot of, let's say, health and positivity to my life. Now I live bouncing around from I'm in Cancun right now. Actually, Playa del Carmen, an hour south, because it's better to live there instead of like a Cancun, because it's full of hotels and tourists. I was in Santa Barbara meeting with my coach. Before that, I was in Lisbon. I have a dream life. I have my dream life. And the difference is certainly the things I've learned, the skills, but it's really about my mindset. And I want to say this too, in case my story may not be that impressive for someone listening. Whoever you look at, whether it's Richard Branson or Elon Musk, think about this, or think about whoever you look at and value them as a person and what they've accomplished in the world, no matter who it is. If you took everything away from them, their money, their connections, I would argue that as long as they had their mindset, they could still recreate their success to some degree. Maybe it wouldn't be quite as much success. Maybe it would be even more. But it's the mindset. I mean, there's a show that I've only seen half of one episode, but I thought it was fascinating. They have a billionaire and they take all his stuff away, and he's broke, has no money, and has to find out how to start a business in 30 days or something, right? And you see what they do. It's like they go into a place, they strike up deals. And so part of that, certainly the skills, but first you have to have that mindset, right? The mindset comes first. And so that's what I would say about mindset. And as far as how the best way to change your mindset is by getting into rooms full of people who think at a much higher level than you. I was just meeting with my coach. He started a space company. He's sending people to space. So being around him elevated the level of conversations I was having, elevated the level that I was thinking at. And he helped me. My focus is shifting away from just fat loss and weight loss, which is super important and I enjoy doing. But it's really foundational for me. And I didn't know what to do next. And he's like, listen, what are you really passionate about? And I said, what I'm really passionate about is longevity. I want to be doing cool stuff until the day I die. I love scuba diving. I love traveling. I want to have a family still. I want to be around and see all those things. And I don't want to be in a hospital bed or in a wheelchair. And he said, you know what? This is what you're going to do. So I don't know if you know Peter Diamandis, but he's like, go join Peter Diamandis' mastermind, because they talk about the exponential technologies that are coming out. They talk about longevity, precision medicine, and stem cells, and 3D printing organs. And it just raised the level of where I was thinking and where I want to go and what type of impact I can hope to make in the world. And so that's what I would say. So you can listen to podcasts and read books, and that's great. I have a podcast, you have a podcast, but spending time with people is the most powerful way to upgrade your mindset.
That's really interesting.
Right,
yeah, right. Yeah.
right,
yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. This makes me think, I just did this in my mastermind yesterday. I was in my business mastermind. I've been in there for 4 years. And I was talking about all the things that I'm working on. And they actually did an intervention on me and said to slow down. So my word of the month now is me. Whereas before it was always on what I was doing. And do the thing is about doing, but it's also doing things out of alignment and out of what really is important to you and in replenishing, not in the way of hustle culture, like what we're used to doing. And so they know that. And it was actually cool. And I think it just kind of speaks to that idea of spending your time around the right people that can also call you out when they can see you not in the place that they know you want to be in. And so it's such a great way to have that supportive group and to find the people that you want to be around.
I think it's everything. I think it's the difference between succeeding at a very fast pace and maybe not even succeeding at all with whatever you're trying to do, whether that's have a great marriage, have a great business, have a great body, whatever it is. And I'll tell you, if I may share a personal story, I'm part of several groups. I got into a conversation with one of the people who are in another group that I'm in, and it's very much focused on making more money and selling. And there's nothing wrong with money. I like money and like what it gives me. So, no, but the way he was talking about it made me feel like I just came from this conversation way up here, and it brought me down a level. And I was like, I don't need to be having these levels of conversations. I don't want to be around people who are having that type of conversation. And he's a dating coach, by the way. I don't want to get into some of the things he was saying, but I was just like, anyway, the takeaway here is do an audit of your social circle. And who do you talk to who gets you thinking that anything is possible? And not in a naive way, but in a very real, like, hey, other people have done this way. Flight wasn't a thing until the Wright brothers had that first flight, right? We put people on the moon. There are ways of solving the problems in our own lives and even the biggest problems that the world faces right now. And the difference is getting into the right mindset. And if you find yourself around people who are bringing you down, and that's different from the intervention that you had, I think that's worth noting because sometimes we can overextend ourselves, which is what it sounded like was happening with you, Stacy. And so your friends helped you to focus is what I took away from that. They weren't trying to bring you down in terms of how do you set smaller goals of impact, but to get you more focused so you achieve that big goal that you're trying to achieve. And I think that's a very important nuance that's worth mentioning. But if people are bringing your energy down, you feel kind of bad after talking with them, that is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, actually, I want to do a whole episode on energy and how the burning of energy and your emotional energy can really affect other areas of your life. And I think that goes back to fitness, it goes back to health, it goes back to business, it goes into anything that we're talking about pretty much.
Agreed.
So I would love to hear your thoughts because I am going to be doing a Get Fit challenge this summer. It's only going to be about 17 days. So it's just a jumpstart. It's not meant to be like a 75 hard type of thing where it's going to be all craziness. It's just meant to be like a supportive challenge. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the dating challenge, even though everyone was thinking they were dating, which they were, but the one thing they did every day was said what they loved about themselves. So just to give you an idea, I want to replenish people, not just have them burn on the do part. And so anyway, just wondering what your thoughts are. Well, let's talk about what would your advice be for something they could do every day that would actually help them with the Get Fit challenge?
Sure. Great question. And what I would say is this, it depends on the person. So if someone's not exercising, I wouldn't say, oh, you got to change the way you're eating. Now, there could be some individual variation here, but I'm going to speak generally. If someone's not exercising, get exercising. What should they do? look for something fun, whether that's walking with friends, taking a dance class, scuba diving, swimming, whatever it is. I'm saying scuba diving because I'm going to be doing some scuba diving soon. And it's one of the things I stay in shape for. But look for low-hanging fruit, because what you're trying to do is optimize for consistency. And if you have 17 days, you don't want to, well, I'm going to run sprints and I'm going to lift heavy weights and I'm going to be sore, but yeah, it's only for 17 days. It's a long way to look at it. Look at 17 days as a jumpstart to create some new habits. And so look at for something that you can do consistently and optimize for consistency first and then get fancy. So that would be for someone who's not currently, let's say they're sedentary, they're not going to the gym, or they're getting less than 5,000 steps per day, whatever the situation might be. The other thing there is track what you're doing as well. Metrics really help us because we tend to think like, oh yeah, I didn't eat too much, or I walked a lot of steps today. Look at the metrics and be sure. So if you're already exercising, then you can either look to optimize what you're doing with exercise, or you can look at changing something nutritionally. And so I think something that's super powerful for people is to write down what you eat every day. Again, self-monitoring is crucial because we think we're good. Like, oh, I don't eat too much. Okay, what'd you eat for dinner 4 days ago? Well, no idea, right?
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to, but what that says is habitual. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But to get some, let's say, I really believe that awareness is the first step to changing. So we need to develop some awareness about what's happening. And so those are a few thoughts that come to mind.
Do you have any other thoughts as far as what could be supportive and helpful during this challenge?
I would say calls with you. I would say, which I'm sure is already happening. I would also say partnering up with someone. So having a type of buddy system and someone to talk with outside the group, because the real issue is that we're not supported through trying to do something. What I mean specifically is the environment that we live in, most of us live in the US, the goal is to make money, forget your health. At least that's the old way, but that's the predominant way as well. Like, don't worry about your health. If you make money, you're the winner. Except people who do that end up not feeling so good. So our environment, it doesn't help you to be fit. So having the support from other people is key.
And what would be your number one piece of advice for people on doing the thing?
Doing the thing, consistency is everything. So I'll go back to what we've talked about many times here. Find something that you can be consistent with. Track it too. If it's creating the podcast, then do a podcast every day or do some type of recording every single day. For example, I'm doing a writing. I don't have a problem exercising. I don't have a problem eating the right thing. We could actually have a talk about that, but because sometimes I do struggle when I'm going through things emotionally. But what I do have a challenge with right now is writing. So I sit down to write every single day. And every time you do it, it gets easier, easier, easier. So optimize for consistency, develop the consistency muscle, and then it's the 1%, the compounding effect. If you can be consistent, you can go to very high levels. But if you can't be consistent, you can't achieve any level of success. So that's what I would say, shoot for consistency.
How would you suggest someone start to shoot for consistency? What's their first step?
The first step is being clear on what you're trying to achieve and making sure that it's doable. So SMART goal, right? Is it specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time bound? So don't say, I'm going to start a podcast. Say, I'm going to record 5 minutes of a podcast every day. Or I'm not sure what the challenge is, but first set a doable goal and then track it And then if you're not being consistent, you need to troubleshoot why and maybe lower the goal, lower the bar. Maybe it needs to be 1 minute instead of 5 because 5 was too long. So those are the 3 things. Get super clear on what the habit is that you're going to do. I suggest daily. Track it to make sure you know how consistent you are, and then adjust as needed.
What would you say to the listeners that are hard on themselves for not doing the things that they want and being able to just begin again?
All you got to ask yourself is this: is that approach helping you to get to the next level? Because there's a lot of talk about shame in our society and body shaming and fat shaming and all types of shaming. But I would, instead of listening to society, just ask yourself, is this helping me or not? Is it hurtful or is it helpful? And if it's hurtful and it's not helping you achieve your goals, why do you keep doing something that is not helping you achieve your goals? But if it's helpful, keep doing it. That's what I would say.
I'd love to hear what's coming alive for you right now after our conversation today.
What's coming alive for me is just, I'm into all the things that I said, the 3D organ printing and the stem cells. I'm going to be getting stem cells for some of my injuries this year. But our conversation today just reminded me all the fancy stuff and the supplements and the cool biohacks and all those things. It really sits on a foundation of behavior change and consistency. And if you don't have that, all the other stuff, it's a bit of a shiny object. So it's really about changing behavior and then building from there. But if someone can't do that, then there's no point in talking about any of the other things, unless it helps with consistency somehow.
Please share with everyone where they can hear your podcast and sign up to work with you.
Sure. And so if you like this talk today and you want to hear more, you can listen to Legendary Life podcast with Ted Ryce. Any platform that you listen to podcasts, on every platform. And if you're an entrepreneur, a founder, a high performer, and you're looking to achieve the type of things that we talked about today, the best place to go is legendarylifepodcast.com/free. And there you can read more about me and watch some information and set up a call if you feel like there's a good connection and if you resonate with what I shared today.
Thanks so much for coming on, Ted. This was really cool. I'm excited to listen back and help me plan the Do the Thing, Get Fit challenge.
Absolutely, Stacy. Thanks so much for having me on. It was a pleasure, and would love to do it again.
And for the listeners, do the thing. Don't wait for opportunity. Create it.